Let's see. 7 times 0 is 0. And 7 times 7 is 49.
Hey, Emmett, are you doing homeschooling?
Hi, Esther. No, I'm doing Bible study. Now, where was I?
7 times 7 equals 49.
Right. And remember the 0. So 7 times 70 is 490.
That's right.
No, it can't be. It doesn't make sense.
I am quite sure that 7 times 70 is 490. We can count it on our fingers if that would help.
No, it's not the math that doesn't make sense. It's the story that Jesus told.
Right. It's the part of the Bible that doesn't seem to make sense.
Right. Jesus told a story about a slave who owed the king 10,000 talents. Whatever those are.
A talent was a unit of currency. If we want to bring the story up to date, in today's money, 10,000 talents would be $3.5 billion.
Wow, that's a lot. Wait, how could anyone owe that much? That doesn't make sense.
Well, maybe Jesus exaggerated just a little bit in the story. What else in the story doesn't make sense to you?
Well, the king says the slave owes him 10,000 talents, which is so much money that no king in his right mind would ever have loaned it out because he would have known it could never be repaid.
I think we've covered that part.
Right. Well, the slave begs for mercy, and the king forgives him all his debt.
Wow, that's incredibly generous. I bet the slave was so grateful.
You'd think. But then the slave goes outside, runs into another slave, owes the first slave 100 denarii. Whatever that is.
100 denarii was probably about $50. It was a day's pay for a laborer.
Wait, 3.5 million versus 50? That really doesn't make sense.
Why?
Well, because when the second slave, the one who owes $50, asks for extra time to pay off his debt, the first slave refuses and has him sent to prison.
That wasn't very nice.
And then the king hears about it. He gets angry at the first slave whose debt he had forgiven, and he has that slave beaten and says he does have to pay back the $3.5 billion.
Well, that doesn't sound very nice either.
But here's where it really gets confusing. Jesus tells the story after telling Peter that he should forgive someone 490 times. That's 7 times 70, you know.
Huh. It doesn't sound like anyone in the story had heard about Jesus' 7 times 70 practice.
But Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven could be compared to the king in this story. But no one ends up being forgiven. How does that make any sense? I'm so confused.
Well, then let's think about something else. Why don't we compare apples and elephants?
What?
Compare apples and elephants.
Apples and elephants? Apples and elephants? I can't compare them. They're not the same.
So maybe when Jesus said that the kingdom of God could be compared to a king and his slaves, Jesus was really saying they're not the same.
I'm so confused.
Well, maybe the point of the story is to get people thinking about how the story would be different if the king forgave and then the forgiven slave had forgiven the other slave.
So, God forgive us as we forgive others. Just like it says in the prayer Jesus taught to his disciples.
Well, the first slave seemed to think he deserved to be forgiven because he had begged to be forgiven, rather than feeling he had received an undeserved gift, a blessing, an act of love.
So when he came to the slave who owed him just a bit of money, he didn't share his gift, his blessing, the forgiveness he had received.
Maybe Jesus was inviting us to compare how the world functions if everyone gets what they deserve versus how the world functions if we forgive one another.
Forgiveness should be the gift that keeps on giving. Giving more forgiveness.
Giving and sharing God's love with everyone.
Well, that's not so confusing. I can say amen to that.
And